Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this very special edition of All Things Aviation and Aerospace. You know, every so often I have the privilege of focusing an entire show on military aviation, which is exactly what we're going to do today. And we're going to take that to a whole other level. You know, several weeks ago, I was hanging out with Kenny, or better known as Lieutenant Colonel Kenyatta Ruffin, or better known as the Rev. And we were at a special and very unique tribute honoring the late Tuskegee Airman icon, Brigadier General Charles E. McGee. We were in Cambridge, Maryland, where the last of the P-520 U.S. Army Air Corps crash boats is docked. For those of you who aren't familiar, which included me until I received the invite, the P-520 crash boats were used to rescue downed pilots during World War II and the Korean War. By the way, the general's youngest daughter, Yvonne McGee, and son, Ron McGee, were also present for that tribute, so it was nice to see and hang out with them. Anyhow, Kenny and I always keeping each other abreast of career-oriented events that are about inspiring the up-and-coming generation. And when he sent me a note about the We Fly 2, which, by the way, I think was a very cool name, Diversity in Military Aviation Showcase, that is taking place at the iconic HBCU, Howard University, and that the Air Force Chief of Staff, General C.Q. Brown, would be on hand and in person, and that a UH-N1 Huey helicopter would be landing at the university, kind of felt pretty compelled to help promote this event coming up this Saturday, April 30th. It'll be in the Crampton Auditorium, and the event takes place between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. We're going to talk a lot more about that, but I was like, oh, we've got to talk about this, and we've got to talk about what's going on with opportunities in military aviation, and specific with this show to the Air Force. So we're going to do just that, and we'll talk about the diversity efforts that are being made and what that really means and how that's going to help move things forward as far as military aviation is concerned. Which brings me to my great panel of guests, who once you hear their backgrounds as well as the paths they've taken, you'll see just how much we are covering in terms of all aspects of military aviation. I will start with the youngest, who is a graduate of Howard University's Air Force ROTC program. He followed that with a master's from the University of Chicago's Harris School of Public Policy, and is currently a tactics officer at the 1st Helicopter Squadron at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland. First Lieutenant Dontae Bell, welcome to the special edition of All Things Aviation and Aerospace. Thank you
for having me. So happy to be here today.
It's great to have you. Yes, I called you the youngest, but we like the fact that you're not too long out of flight school, and you can tell some of our younger viewers just what that experience is like and what to expect. Shifting to the flight crew side, we have a flight chief, also at the 1st Helicopter Squadron at Joint Base Andrews, who worked his way up from a material management journeyman, has served in Iraq, and has numerous other accomplishments. Technical Sergeant Demario Greene, welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Thank you for having me, sir.
It's great to have you on board. As I mentioned before, we have Lieutenant Colonel Kenyatta Ruffin, currently a White House Fellow after being the commander of the 71st Operations Support Squadron at Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma. Kenny is an Air Force Academy graduate. He's also the founder of the Legacy Flight Academy that many of you probably have heard about, and has a long list of accomplishments, some of which he will share with us later on the show because we can't take the whole show to go through Kenny's resume. Kenny, once again, welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Thanks, Spencer. It's always great to be with you and to help promote aviation.
Well, it's great to have you. And now the star of today's show, kind of always wanted to say that. Actually, our main guest today, and one that I will be asking at least 1 million questions, is the commander of the Air Force ROTC, Reserved Officer Training Corps, Detachment 130 at Howard University. Like First Lieutenant Bell, she is a Howard University graduate who's also a product of the Howard ROTC program. Lieutenant Colonel Person has a Master of Arts in Human Resource Management from the University of Maryland and has served as a maintenance and munitions officer. That's what I was trying to remember earlier, munitions. I wanted to add ammo to that. But anyhow, maintenance and munitions officer among many, many other accomplishments. Lieutenant Colonel Redahlia Person, welcome to All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Thank you for the great introduction. It's nice to be the star of an event, but glad to be here and talk about the other side of the aviation. Someone's got to maintain the airplanes to put them in the sky, so why not?
Absolutely. It's really great, seriously, to have you guys on. And there's a lot of ground to cover. I just spent a half hour just doing the intro. No, well, we've got a lot of ground to cover in a little less than an hour, and I'd like to make sure that we get a lot of information out to those who are watching and listening. So I want to start out, and I'm going to kind of go right to you. In fact, you were being teased by Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin earlier, Dontae Bell, about your involvement with this whole project at Howard. So why don't we start out with you telling us a little bit about that and about how this came about to what it's going to be, which is a really exciting event this Saturday.
Well, I'll start with the joke that I told Colonel Ruffin that definitely has an element of truth to it. It all started with a dream. I wanted to land on Howard's Field. And in the process of doing that, I wanted to also figure out a way to get back to my alma mater and really tell folks about the magic of aviation, which was something I didn't really discover until later in the game. One thing led to another. I wanted to see if we could get the Chief of Staff, the Air Force involved. And of course, being a lieutenant, I didn't really imagine how much it would take to get someone at that level onto a campus and speaking to students. And then once
the boss of the Air Force, yeah, that would take a little bit.
Sometimes ignorance is bliss. And so he actually agreed to come. And then it just kind of took off from there. A lot of other folks were pretty excited about this project. And of course, as Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin and Lieutenant Colonel Person will show, a lot of other folks have come before me in doing things like this to inspire young folks to get involved in Air Force aviation. So I guess this is me beginning to do my part. I'm just kind of learning by trial through fire. So here we are.
Yeah, no, that's great. So tell us what's going to be happening this Saturday.
So this Saturday, we'll be kicking off the event with the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General CQ Brown Jr. He'll be coming and having a fireside chat with Howard University's president, Dr. Wayne A.I. Frederick. So they'll be chatting about an array of different issues and really starting a good conversation about diversity in aviation taking place at an HBCU, in my opinion, the best HBCU in the country. So I think it's a great place to start that conversation. Throughout the rest of the day, we'll have a few other panels as well. And we'll continue to talk more about diversity in aviation. We'll continue to talk about racial minorities and women serving in positions of power in the aerospace community. And then also some opportunities that exist in cutting edge fields, maybe beyond the traditional scope of flying in a cockpit. So we'll talk about RPAs, talk about the Space Force, and other elements like that. And
yeah,
then, of
can
course,
you tell us what RPA means for those who
I'm
are
sorry.
not?
Of course. Remotely piloted aircraft. So the drones that we see in the sky.
Yeah.
And so to conclude the event, we'll have lunch, and then we will have a VR, a virtual reality simulator. They're available for students to practice flying and see
Awesome.
what it's like in a simulated environment. And then we'll have some helicopters landing in Howard University's field. So that dream that I told you about is a few days away from becoming a reality. And then we'll be able to bring an actual Air Force aircraft into a space for students to see, touch, and then ask both other air crew like myself questions about that specific helicopter. There will also be several other pilots who will come to are traveling in to attend and speak about their own platforms as well. So hopefully we'll cover our bases and getting more folks involved.
No, that's fantastic. I think the whole idea of flying some helicopters in, which is one of your main goals. I will ask you this: do you get to fly General Brown in?
See, I couldn't do it all, so
Okay.
not this time around, but maybe next time. Next time.
You never know. I had to ask that though. That would have been actually pretty cool. Just to make sure I understand, are the helicopters flying in first thing and then we'll be there on static display? Is that how that's going to be set up?
So they'll be flying in the afternoon. So the panels will kick off first, and then after.
Okay, so you do all of that, and then they're going to arrive.
Correct.
Okay.
And then we'll bring everyone outside, and we'll continue the remainder of the event outside. And I forgot to mention that in addition to the VR simulator and the helicopter landings, we'll also have some mixers. So some folks there who will be able to talk about all sorts of opportunities. The DC Air National Guard will be there as well. We have a few other folks who, of course, the ROTC detachments will have their own recruiting booths. So there will be folks here to continue to talk about how students can actually get involved further in these opportunities that we've mentioned.
Sure. Lieutenant Colonel Person, you have to be very excited about this taking place at also your alma mater and with what you do with the ROTC program. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, very excited. Yes, Howard is a big known HBCU, but little is known about our ROTC program here. And so this is definitely going to open the scope for Air Force. Our detachment is the only detachment in the DC area. So I don't only serve the students at Howard University, but also George Washington, Georgetown, American, Marymount Catholic University, and Marymount and the University of District Columbia. So we have also pushed this message out to those universities to get them to get involved in aviation. We've also pushed it to local high schools and middle schools because that's where the foundation starts. We need to give you that dream. So I'm not sure when Dontae's dream happened when he wanted to fly on Howard University's campus, but if I can plant that seed now for a middle school student or a high school student for them to look forward to something when they get to college and join the Air Force through ROTC, that's what I'm here to do.
Sure.
Another platform that we're looking to do is I'm bringing in some flight nurses. So we talk about aviation and that's flying the aircraft, but what about the people that also support it? We've got lots of medical schools here where there are nurses that are ready to graduate, but maybe we give them a seed to think about doing something different, about being on the back of an airplane, using their medical skills to save someone's life. If you don't know about that, being in the military, you would never know that could be a career path for you. And so that's another opportunity for us to spread the word about what goodness is in the Air Force. Yes, we're about supporting the pilots, but there's a whole cast behind it, and we need everybody to be on our team to support them.
So you bring up something that's really, really key about all of this, and that's talking about aviation overall, not just in terms of being a pilot. Yes, 3 of us on this program are pilots, so we're a little biased, but there's so much there. The flight nurses. You yourself come from a mechanics background, which is interesting because you also have a master's in HR, but that's another story.
Someone's got to manage the people.
But let me ask you this while we're talking about that, and before we take a deeper dive, I wanted to go back to the ROTC part, the Reserved Officer Training Corps. This is a program that's been around almost as long as the Air Force, and it's a very effective program. There is actually a junior ROTC program, and then at the college level, it's the ROTC program. I'm kind of biased about it because I think it's a great program, but can you tell for people that aren't familiar, what is it that makes it such a great program and such an ideal thing to get involved with when you come to a school like Howard?
So our goal is to build officers for the Air Force, but I say we take it a step further and build better citizens from America. And from that perspective, it's because we're teaching you to look inside yourself, to dig deep and follow directions and guidance. A lot of people feel that being in the military is following orders, which is true, but you've got to learn, in order to lead, you got to learn how to follow, to be a good follower as well. So that's how we start off the program as a freshman and a sophomore. How well can you follow directions? And how are you learning from the people that are teaching you? And then as a junior and a senior, you are now what we call professional officer candidates, and you're the ones that are in charge of the cadets underneath you, teaching you, learning your foundations of what makes a good leader. You can still be your same self. You can use your personality. I am a happy-go-lucky, smiley person. I'm not, chopping heads off. But if I need to, in order to get the mission done, I can do that. It's about becoming a team and becoming a team player. And I really feel the Air Force is doing a better job of not only leading, but building teams. How well you are building a team, taking all these different diverse backgrounds and bringing people together to execute the mission. So that's what ROTC for me, we are building better citizens for America, in my opinion.
Sure. No, That's exactly what I wanted to point out with it. I'm going to go back to you, First Lieutenant Bell. Again, I was talking about you being fresh out of flight school pretty much, and the fact that you started fixed wing and then transitioned to helicopters. We'll talk about that in a sec. But I was wondering, because you had a dream about something that's now getting ready to get fulfilled, which is landing at your alma mater. But before that, what actually sparked your interest in aviation? You know, where was that? Where are you from, and how did that all come about?
Sure. So I think to talk about that, I'll very quickly discuss how I joined ROTC, because once you kind of learn that piece of me, I think the pilot piece will make a little more sense. So I came to Howard University and originally did not want anything to do with the military. I'd heard about it, but I was like, nope, I want to go to college. I want to go get my degree, go be a lawyer or something like that, you know, because that's what I'd heard. In my head, that was the definition of success. Of going to law school, med school, I couldn't do blood, so I'm like, law base. So I originally didn't want to do RTC. Long story short, I gave it a shot. My commander at the time pulled me in, figured out a way to give me a scholarship. So I was like, well, I guess I'm sticking with it.
Why didn't you want to do it originally?
Originally, I thought that it would limit my options. I thought the military would be constricting. I think I subscribed to the thought that, you know, if I'm in the military, I lose my sense of originality. I lose my sense of freedom, you know, ironically, you know, and through service. But it's funny that I say that, because at the same time, I was also very committed to the idea of service. I knew that I wanted to serve my country somehow, in some way. And so in hindsight, the military actually made a lot of sense.
So let me jump in real quick and ask you, Lieutenant Colonel Person, do you find that common amongst a lot of your candidates for the ROTC program, or how that works?
Yes, a lot of them feel that it's all about war. It's not. I will say the Air Force does a good job in teaching you, building the skills you already have. So if you are a finance major, there's a job in the Air Force where you will go and study finance. If you want to be a civil engineer, there is a job in the Air Force to do that. It is all aligned, and it provides more opportunities. And once people see that, it's like, oh my God, why didn't I do this sooner? So I think it's a lot of people fear the military all about being about going to war, and it's not. If we need to, we will, but it's about defining those skills to support our home first. So.
Sure. DeMario, I saw you actually smiling when we were talking about this. What was going through your mind as we discussed this? You need to unmute too. There you go.
Well, I think honestly, a little history behind me. I was a Air Force junior ROTC grad I'm from Hampton, Virginia, graduated from Hampton High School. It's just, I was thinking back, to those memories that I had when I was in high school, and, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I just thought, well, is the military really for me? 14 years later, I think I've come up with that answer. So
did the program give you some direction when you finally got involved with the ROTC?
100%. My instructors were amazing. I wasn't 100% sure if I wanted to go to college right after high school. So I enlisted a few months after graduation, and I never looked back.
Yeah. What do you do now? What is your job at the 1st Helicopter Squadron? Tell us what the 1st Helicopter Squadron is, and then what you do for them.
We are the largest helicopter squadron in the NCR. My job by trade is I'm a special missions aviator. So I'm a mix between a flight engineer, an aerial gunner, and a load master, all in the one career field. I'm the helicopter.
It's a lot of responsibility.
Expert. Oh, yes, sir. I'm the helicopter systems expert. Calculate a lot of takeoff and landing data for the pilots. We run emergency procedures checklists, engine startup checklists, engine shutdown checklists. But overall, we're just there to be an extra set of eyes and ears to the pilots to ensure safe and mission execution. That's it.
For lack of a better term, I'm gathering that wasn't on your radar when you first, started out.
Not at all. Not at all.
So how did it come about? This is what our viewers like to hear and see. They like to know. So you're in this position now that you're really enjoying. You're having a great time. You're aviation mission specialist on a helicopter with the first squadron at Andrews, but you didn't start out that way. How did that come about?
Well, I actually started off in the Air Force as a supply troop. I was doing supply for about 5-6 years. During that time, I deployed a few times. You mentioned me going to Iraq. When I was in Iraq, when there were squirrely things going on, every time an event would happen, I would hear the helicopters roar up right after an event. And I just would always wonder, wow, what are they going to go do right now? And I think, by the time I was putting on staff sergeant, I wanted to do something more. I wanted to, I've always had, like Lieutenant Bell mentioned, always having a passion to serve, but I just wanted to serve in a higher capacity.
Yeah. Lieutenant Bell, coming back to you, you were talking about the ROTC was really a turning point for you. How did that further guide your career to where you ended up going to flight school? And then how'd you end up picking helicopters?
Well, when I first joined ROTC, once I was finally in, right, I piloting was not on my radar. At Howard, we hadn't had a single pilot select for years. And I to this day, there are only, I think, 2 that I know who are pilots from Howard, and they served in like the 90s. So it's for, at least for me, I didn't see that around me. Most folks who go to school in DC, they want a job that can help them get a policy job afterwards. And I think that that's where my head was as well. So I was not thinking about it. But at the time, I had a commander, my ROTC commander, who was in Lieutenant Colonel Person's position. He was a Black combat systems officer, and that's an aircrew position in the Air Force. And he worked on I can't remember which aircraft he worked on, but he said, hey, I just go up for the pilot position, put in a package together, see how you do. And then if you don't get it, you don't get it. And that's that. I said, oh, well, I guess that can't hurt anything. My pilot scores were terrible. I really think that it was my ranking that helped me get in there. Then I found out I got a pilot slot, and he pulled me into his office and he said, hey, being a lineman on the football team is a great position, but you have the opportunity to be the quarterback. Would you like to be the quarterback, or would you like to be the lineman? And then the ego started kicking in. I'm like, well, you know me. And that's what made me jump into it. But I will say,
what great mentorship though that is, that you got that from him. Yeah, absolutely.
He kind of held my hand and just dragged me along, and I was too young to really know any better. For me, I didn't know anything about aviation. I didn't know that it was even something that I could do. You joined the Air Force, but I didn't think I was going to be a pilot. I had no exposure to it prior. And so my first flights, all my flight hours are with the military. Just recently, I flew general aviation for the first time, but the military has given me all that exposure. So I struggled in pilot training. It wasn't easy, but I think once I kind of figured out the game of it, right, I stepped into the challenge. I really enjoyed it. As far as transitioning to helicopters, I love my time in airplanes. I love flying the T6, the Texan 2, which is what we train in. I love doing the aerobatic stuff. I love ripping it up in the pattern, doing a bunch of touch and go landings. But my favorite flights were the ones where I was flying visually, so outside of the clouds, and I was able to see the ground. I liked my low-level flights, and I liked the opportunities that helicopters offered with doing what I saw at the time as more tactical stuff. I wasn't really interested in flying fast like Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin. It's not for everyone, right? And so that kind of left me between, do I fly a heavy aircraft, a cargo type aircraft, or do I go fly helicopters? And so I chose helicopters, and now I'm one of the weird guys in the Air Force who's flying. No,
you're not weird. You picked an awesome choice. I as much fixed wing time as I have, I'm a helicopter guy too. I think it's a great machine, and like you say, has great strategic and tactical advantages with it. Since you brought up Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin, and since he is an academy grad, and since he has the legacy the Legacy of Flight Foundation, and has been involved with a lot of things regarding young people and getting into aviation, particularly military, if that's their choice and that type of thing. Kenny, tell us a little bit about that and about your perspective on all of this that we're talking about today.
Vince, like you said, we don't have enough time for me to share everything. So the first thing I'll just say is kudos to the young LT. I think he's even a captain select maybe, and just what he has done with this event and the initiative and motivation he's shown and professionalism. I think what I want people to take away from it, more than just the flying piece, is about who you are and who you become as a part of the Air Force, right? Where you can have a dream that seems outlandish, right? Like it seems like I want to go land a helicopter in the middle of downtown DC because that's where I went to school. But yet, because you're in the Air Force and because you have wingmen like Colonel Pearson, like Sergeant Greene, you're able to see your dreams come true and you're able to make real change and real impact. And so when I think about today and about this weekend, again, I just get motivated and excited because it represents the best of the Air Force. It represents the best of the nation. And I'm just happy to play whatever small part I can in being a wingman or providing close air support for this activity.
You know, Kenny, you have done a ton of flying. You've done a ton of flight instruction. It was really cool when we went to Kansas City with the general and you flew in with a student and everything. And I think that was in the T6, right? And everything. So you've kind of seen a plethora of things regarding that. But now you're a White House fellow. So I want you to tell us how you go from the academy to flying to instructing to being grounded for a minute here in DC.
The way you do it is, again, with a lot of support, with a lot of mentors, and with dreams. So I've known about the White House Fellowship since I was a cadet. It's actually another American hero who unfortunately recently passed, who's kind of the beginning of the story for me, Colin Powell. For those of you who don't know who Colin Powell was, just Google it there. He was a White House fellow. I was reading his autobiography as a freshman at the Air Force Academy, and that was the first time I came across this whole White House fellowship thing. And it's been on my radar for over 20 years. And just, again, through a myriad of other mentors, including Colonel retired Nicole Malachowski, who was the first ever female Thunderbird pilot. Just had lots of different people. There's so many more people I could name,
Sure.
But just that always was able to inspire me and to help me, again, just to be not just a role model and a mentor, but truly a wingman. And again, I think that's what the culture of being in the Air Force is about. It's not just about saying, hey, good job, let me know if I can do anything, but it's actually rolling up your sleeves and working together side by side. And so throughout my whole career, as I've hopefully been able to serve others and to help others have served and helped me. And that has led me to this current place.
Sure. Lieutenant Colonel Person, let me take you back, way back into time. No, let me take you back to when you first got into the ROTC program as a student. What was that like in terms of your, what brought you to the program or got your attention with it to make you want to actually join the program and do what you've done?
So mine starts back being a child. I'm an Army brat. So my mother served in the military. And what I liked about her mission was the fact that every 3 years we got to move around. And so that led to me being a history major. So I got to see all the places that I read about as a kid. So fast forward, I got accepted to Howard. And I knew I wanted to serve, but I knew I wanted to go to college first. So depending on where you grow up, there may not be a ROTC unit around you. So there wasn't one in my high school. So I didn't know anything about ROTC or being an officer until I got to the campus at Howard University. So I went downstairs, I said, I need some scholarship money. What do you need me to do? And so they kind of told me about the program. And what I loved about it, I went to an HBCU because I wanted to know about all the history that I didn't know about, that wasn't in books, but I missed that diverse culture. I miss being around other diverse students, which I found in ROTC. So I had the best of both worlds. I got to learn about my African-American culture that wasn't always written in history books, but then I got to learn about the cultures of all the people that were around me and I grew up. So that's where it started back for me. And I knew I wanted to serve. I saw my mom serving. I saw the camaraderie that she had, the wingmen that she had with, well, they weren't wingmen. I'm not sure what the Army calls they're Huya partners, I got
battle buddies.
Well, battle buddies, yes. I got to see that firsthand, and I wanted to be a part of that. The realization hit on 9/11. I was here at Howard University. I woke up that morning thinking, what movie is this? And then going outside and seeing the smoke from the Pentagon. And I didn't get sad. I didn't get scared. I was like, let's go. I think if I was on that plane, I would have been the one to say, let's roll. So that really dug me deep into learning what my leadership skills were to go lead airmen, which is why I went to aircraft maintenance. Flying would have been cool, but I like working with people. I like building a team. I like saying, hey guys, let's come up with a plan and let's go. Let's go get the bad guys. So that was how I got into ROTC, how it made me a better person and got me ready to lead airmen, which I've done most of my career and I look forward to continuing to do.
Cool on the leadership tip, but how did you know you had mechanical skills? Because you're like an ace mechanic with aircraft.
So I am not. Being an aircraft maintenance officer is learning how to manage people and manage assets and putting them together. So I did go to a basic tech school, so I know how an engine works. I know, the left and right side of an airplane, but the technical aspect of it, I have to learn on my subject matter experts. I learned how to ask the right questions. As a lieutenant, oh man, that just works that way. No, it doesn't. Go give me the technical order and show me how things are broken down and how it's supposed to get fixed. So I am not an engineer, not technical expert, but I know how to ask the right questions and take a team of 20 people to fix a broken helicopter or a broken aircraft.
Well, so blow me down. I mean, that I had it all wrong. I just, when somebody tells you they're in maintenance, you assume that means that they're like, that's their expertise. So you bring up a really, really great point. And I'm sure everybody on this call would agree with me that you can be involved in something and not necessarily, for example, you say, you didn't have any degree in engineering or expertise in that, et cetera, but yet here you were at an air base in charge of an entire maintenance group. If I recall, you commanded a maintenance group for both fixed and helicopter. Is that right?
So yes, I did the B2 out at Whiteman Air Force Base. So right. I worked there doing the back shop. So the off maintenance of the B2, and then my second, it was a squadron command, was doing the rescue unit. So I had 10 C-130s, and then I had 13 H-860 helicopters. So I had two sets of maintainers that we all came together. The good thing about rescue, it talks about teamwork, because yes, the helicopter can get in there, but they need the C-130 to get them gas and to bring all the stuff that the helicopters need to help them land and take off.
Yeah. So during your Air Force career, at some point you decided to go and get your master's in human resource management. Was that to help you even better understand the human factor in terms of from a leadership standpoint?
Yes, it was. That was my strategic. Because being in maintenance, as you go, at the time I knew I was going to be a squadron commander. How do I be better as a squadron commander and eventually a group commander? You kind of need to know what those foundational pieces are.
Yeah. Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin, you have had a lot of experience in the leadership roles that you've played through the years. Share your perspective on the leadership aspect and opportunities in the Air Force.
Absolutely, Vince. So one of the biggest ones is just that you really don't understand what your capabilities are until you try. And the Air Force Academy, the Air Force Academy for sure, but the Air Force as a whole, people get all concerned. It's military, it's life or death. It's amazing how much leeway and how much opportunity we give you to succeed or fail. And we know that failure is a part of eventual success. And so the responsibilities that you have and that you're able to get through the Air Force are truly uncomparable to pretty much anything else. Sergeant Greene would probably have much more examples. I can't imagine doing what he does. Not once, not even close. And he did it later on in his career. We have people straight out of high school that go into his career that are basically responsible for the safety of this helicopter with a crew of 6 other people in flight. No, thank you. Right? I all I do is fly. And so the opportunities you have are just truly unimaginable, and it builds you stronger. And so one thing, obviously, Vince, that the Tuskegee Airmen are vitally important to me and vitally important to the Air Force and vitally important to this nation. And when you think about, again, who they were and the courage they had is one of the biggest things, the competence they had, right? Just when you think about what it takes to serve, what it takes to be proficient, what it takes to lead, those are things that you can't necessarily find on Wall Street or in another job. And so when I look at the Air Force in the cockpit, in the air, on the ground, it makes you a better person than you ever knew that you could be. And it's definitely not for everyone. And you can join the Air Force as a civilian. We have civilians who are a part of our team. So
absolutely,
there are opportunities for you in the world's greatest air and space force if you want it.
Yeah. So Kenny, I'm glad you brought up the Tuskegee Airmen. Of course, there was no way you and I would make it through an hour and not bring them up at least 2 or 3 times, as that's just the way it goes. No, but one of the things that stands out to me about the Tuskegee Airmen that Brigadier General McGee always talked about was the overall support network of the entire group. So yeah, there were 900 and something pilots. 300 and something of them were combat pilots, but there were thousands and thousands of other support personnel. And I met people like the intelligence officer who actually pulled intelligence information together for the pilots. And General McGee always talked about the importance of his mechanic and that he couldn't do the flying that he did if he didn't have an ace mechanic, right there taking care of the plane like it was his and things like that. And you could go on and on with administrative and all the other support things you talked about. Lieutenant Colonel Person, you were talking about flight nurses. That was part of the Tuskegee Airmen era too, and things like that. I want to take advantage of this discussion about that and shift a little bit and talk about one of the things that is a focal point for what is going to take place Saturday, and that's diversity in military aviation. And what does that really mean, and what are some of the challenges there? Because as Demario and I were talking about earlier before the call, there are a lot of opportunities in the Air Force and in the military, but yet there's still that challenge, if you will, of reaching a broader audience in terms of people getting involved. And I think one of the things we've touched on through the show so far is a lot of people just aren't aware of the opportunities. A lot of people have a tendency to pigeonhole, whether they think, oh, you go in the military, you go into war, or you go in the military, you're going to be a pilot. And they don't think about all of the other things. And as long as I've been around, it took you saying, Lieutenant Colonel Person, about what you actually are responsible for in your job prior to the ROTC stuff, that like, oh yeah, okay, so no. Yeah, and it's one of those things where, and I think you touched on it, whatever your expertise is or your skill set, if you will, it can be applicable in the military. It can be applicable in the Air Force. So you may say, well, I'm interested in this, and I'll give a very current example. Tomorrow, the first African-American woman is going to launch and go to the International Space Station to live and work there. It's amazing because the last African-American woman that went to space was 30 years ago, and that was Mae Jemison. Hard to believe it's been 30 years before another one got an opportunity, but whatever. She's a geologist, she loves rocks. So they even called her a rock star the other day. I thought that was pretty corny. But anyhow, I thought I was bad. But, really, you call a geologist a rock star. But I guess point taken. But my point is, she's a geologist. Who knew that geologist would eventually get accepted into the astronaut program, which happened 5 years ago. And now she is going into space and going to the International Space Station to study the geology and other things that they'll be doing out there. And she may be a huge candidate for a future mission to the moon, et cetera. So I'm just using that as an example, but I'd love to hear you guys' perspective about what I'm talking about.
So I'll hop in real quick there to start. So one of the craziest things is we have veterinarians in the Air Force. I had the opportunity to serve in recruiting and focus on this. And one of the best things about the Air Force is the best thing, not one of the best thing about the Air Force is the airmen, and that every airman has a story. Again, you could spend an entire show on just each of the four of us here, and we talk about where we came from and all those things. But when I look at the diversity aspect specifically and about flying, one of the things, couple important things to set the stage. So first is that African Americans make about 2% of pilots. That is both in the military and commercial aviation. And in general, pilots are 90% white and 90% male. That's the general number.
The stats are there.
Yep, the New York Times actually just had an article about it this weekend. And one of the things, diversity can be a sensitive topic, or I like to call it inclusion in diversity, because it's not just about diversity, but it's about inclusion. And so with that, what I say is, hey, the problem isn't the 90%, right? Like, I love all the pilots I fly, right? Like, they're my bros, right? It's not about the 90% we have. It's about the 90% that are stuck on the ground, that don't have an opportunity, that are looking up to the sky and have no way to connect that dream, or knowing it's a dream, to where they are. And so that's what we're really trying to do. We're not about taking away from anyone. We're not about saying you're bad or you're wrong, but it's about making sure that people have an opportunity. And that opportunity really does start with awareness, which is why it's so important, the work that you do, Vince, and why it's so important, the work that Lieutenant Bell has done with his event. So again, I'm really excited to continue to promote opportunity for everyone to be a part of our incredible aerospace industry.
Absolutely. Lieutenant Colonel Person, you want to piggyback on that?
I do. And you're right. It's about opportunities. A lot of people don't know that they can do that. And I think that's why it's important that we did reach out to middle schools and high schools. I'm not sure if you know the Civil Air Patrol. That is a great opportunity for a young student or anybody that's interested in aviation. So one thing that I've done this year since I've been here is partner with the Civil Air Patrol to actually stand up a detachment here at Howard University. Nice. That is going to be also virtual as well as in person, to allow people here within the DC area to get to a detachment where they will be exposed to flying, which turns into, if you don't necessarily want to go in the military, but you can learn about search and rescue, which falls into, hey, eventually you can learn how to fly a small Cessna or a helicopter. And if America needs you, because someone's stuck out in the woods, they can call on you to go and do that. Again, it's about opportunities and spreading that wealth and starting at the young age. Because I think had I been exposed to it a little bit sooner, I think I would have no problem wanting to fly. So I did the next best thing was be responsible for fixing them and giving the pilots the keys, but they got to give it back to me at the end of the night. But yes, it's about exposure. And Civil Air Patrol will be here this weekend. So even if you're, 20 years old and you think you want to get into flying, Civil Air Patrol has a place for you to expose you to that. So maybe you can get an orientation flight and see, can you fly? You don't know until you try. But it's presenting opportunities.
Sure. No, I was going to go to Dontae Bell because, you're again, I've made that reference, but you're relatively new as compared to everyone else that's been in the service for a number of years. At your stage of things and what you've gone through so far, did you feel like there were any challenges, or has it been fairly smooth for you, or what's your perspective on that?
There were definitely a lot of challenges. I say pilot training was difficult, but I mean, yes, the training is difficult. Anyone who goes through UPT undergraduate pilot training will face their set of issues. But I found that the reason why it was so challenging for me is because it felt particularly isolating. And I don't say that to say anyone treated me super unfairly. Maybe there were moments that were a little awkward, but I think that when you're in a class, we talked about there being 2% of pilots are Black. So I was the only African-American in my cohort of in my class. And so out of 20 people, it was just me. And those numbers that Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin spouted off definitely reflect reality. And I felt that. And I felt a lot of cultural differences when we would hang out outside of the specific classroom areas. And honestly, in the pilot training world, that's where a lot of learning would happen. So I didn't necessarily have that same affinity group, a natural affinity group for folks who who I enjoyed hanging out with outside of work, who maybe we could bounce ideas off of each other. Just certain things. And again, it's not that these are bad people, but sometimes just not feeling understood. Certain things that I would think about, or the way I would view the world, a lot of other folks didn't necessarily see the world that way. And I didn't necessarily want to go through the ropes of trying to explain that to someone. So those were the biggest challenges. I think the actual flying part, while it was very difficult, actually wasn't the worst aspect of it for me.
Yeah, but I would ask you this, I'm going to compare you with Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin. Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin wanted to fly since he saw an airplane since he was a kid. You really didn't become interested in flying until you were already in the ROTC program. When you got selected to go to flight training and started that whole process, do you think the fact that you were also learning something that wasn't even on your radar played a part in the challenges that you had?
Oh yeah, I tried to quit 3 separate times. I literally walked into my commander's office on 3 occasions and said, I don't want to do this. This is not fun. This was before I had actually flown, right? The way the pilot training is structured, and most pilot training programs are structured, you do all your ground training first, and then you actually fly. So I'm just going through the battle of trying to stay alive with all the tests and general knowledge and book stuff that I'm supposed to learn. And I'm like, this thing's boring to me. This doesn't seem interesting to me. I have no clue why I'm doing this. And so long story short, I had a lot of good people who said, nope, you're going to stay in there. You're going to at least get to your first flight, get to your dollar ride is what we call our first ride, and see how you feel about it. And if you don't like it, then you can quit, but don't quit until you try it. And I'll never forget, like I remember it like it's yesterday. And I actually kind of get emotional when I think about it. My first time flying in the T-6 in a military aircraft, we put the power in, we start taking off down the runway. It was a beautiful day. It was sunny, partly cloudy. I think the best type of weather to fly in my opinion. And for the first time in my life, I felt freer than I had ever felt before. I felt like I was in control. I felt like I could conquer the world. I felt like Superman. In reality, I was probably really out of trim, and my instructor probably thought I was, trying to kill him back there. But that's what flight was to me. And after that first flight, it changed everything. Sure. Pilot was still a challenge after that, but I knew kind of what I was striving to do. And I remember that after that moment and after those first few months after pilot training, I'm like, man, if I would have known about this or been exposed to this back when I was a cadet, back when I was in high school, back when I was at the age Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin was when he first discovered aviation, my journey would have been substantially different. My attitude would have been completely different because your attitude determines your altitude, right? So I think that for me, as soon as that happened, I knew that I was going to come back and do an event like We Fly To, because I knew that if I can at least tell somebody back who's from where I'm from about this, maybe that their journey can be that much easier. Because when you have that sense of purpose, it changes the entire game. Because it wasn't about ability. It was about desire. It was about interest, right? Initially. And that didn't come until I had folks who, again, grabbed me, dragged me along the way, even though I was kicking and screaming until it all worked out.
Yeah. Listen, I you make me want to go into a whole nother thing, but I'm going to refrain from that for just a few minutes because I want to give Sergeant Greene an opportunity to talk a little bit about his perspective from the enlisted side and any challenges you may have faced while you were, coming up the ranks, so to speak.
When you talk about challenges, I think it's, some of the same psychological things that, Lieutenant Bell just talked about, the isolation. When you're going through, me personally, when I retrained into special missions aviation, it was, wow, I'm learning something new. So I also have the intimidation of, being the best at one of the most difficult Air Force jobs there is. And then I also have, oh, it's just me here. And, sometimes we can be in our own heads and we can allow that to conquer us. But I think it's important that you have good leadership and good mentorship at the top. I ran into a similar situation down at in New Mexico, and I had a lieutenant colonel pull me into his office. Lieutenant Colonel Nick DePoma, I'm dropping names. He motivated me to stay in aviation, and to this day, that was one of the best conversations that I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, we have about 7 minutes left, and I want to spend the last part of this show talking about mentorship. Because I think, well, first of all, and Kenny, you'll probably laugh about this because you've heard him say it, the late Brigadier General McGee. Whoa, oh, thought that was me. I was like, I know I turned my phones off. Anyhow, the late Brigadier General McGee, one of his last, almost you could say dying wish was that everybody understand the importance of mentorship and that everybody that has an opportunity mentor somebody to help them move forward on their career path. It is very clear with what both of you have said, particularly, you, Lieutenant Bell, and you, Sergeant Greene, what both of you have said. You have people in significant roles in your life here with the Air Force that kept you on track, that kept you motivated, and that kept you from maybe stepping back or feeling like you couldn't accomplish something. And I just would like all of you to just kind of, like I said, over the remainder of the show, let's just talk about that in terms of the importance of mentorship. Lieutenant Colonel Person, I see you nodding, totally in agreement. So I'm taking that means a lot to you.
It does, especially when we talk about, being 2% pilots, Black pilots, 2% of pilots being Black. I'm aircraft maintenance. Most of the units I've gone to, I've been the only Black female officer in maintenance because it is male dominated. But it's taking opportunities to see what other Black females came before me, not only in maintenance, but also in the Air Force. What you will find, there's a lot of females in the medical side. So yes, they are doctors and nurses taking care of patients, but they're going to see a different side of mentorship that I can go and ask them, to help me advise me on how to handle different situations. And so when I do see a female young lieutenant, I pull her aside and say, hey, you're joining a great team. It's going to be hard, but if you need anything, I'm here to help. So just making sure that the biggest part is that you make yourself available.
Yeah. Lieutenant Colonel Ruffin?
Vince, that mentorship is my passion, one of my passions. And I think we all often overthink it and make it too difficult. And I say all the time, I said it to my airmen, if you've been in the Air Force for more than one day, you have something to offer to the person behind you. And so it's just simply sharing what you've learned. It's not this whiteboard or PowerPoints, right? It's just being there to say, hey, when I went through, this is what I was thinking, or where I'm at now, right? And so this show, even right here, right, is a great example. So Colonel Pearson's been a commander 3 times, I think, squadron commander 3 times, right? About to be a 4th. If and when I get command again, I'm going to be calling her because I'm gonna like, all right, listen, I did it once and it was for 14 months. I still have a lot to learn, right? Tell me about this. So it's both the mentor and the mentee have a role to play in seeking it out and asking, as well as the mentor being assertive and willing to share what they've learned.
Sure. As we wrap up, I'll go with you first, Lieutenant Bell. For the younger viewers that are watching and listening, and their parents that also watch and listen to the show, what one piece of advice would you give from what you've experienced thus far?
I would say that the biggest thing that I'd say is I think that if you go down this path or go down, join the Air Force or anything like that, and you feel like you don't have it together, you feel like you're not doing enough, right, or that you're maybe not capable or able to do something, maybe because you haven't seen someone do it before you. In that exact way. I'll quote something an instructor of mine said a while ago that's really stuck with me. The difference between confidence and cockiness is competence. So know your stuff, right? Study hard, study well, but at the same time, feel free to stand on that. Be bold in the decisions that you make. I think that's a key component of flying in general. And I think that's something that's also really helped with life and bringing events like this, We Fly to fruition.
Sure. Sergeant Greene, same question.
I think what we're talking about as far as our mentorship and as far as if someone was to ask me, how to stay motivated, how to stay energized. I think it's all, for one, it's about professionalism. And then for two, it's about realizing that the mental stressors that you go through as a person, you're not the only person who's ever experienced those things. If you have a passion to want to do something, look for other people who, enjoy teaching about those things, who enjoy inspiring others to continue that path, and just reach out to them. A lot of times that's the biggest thing. We'll know somebody that does the similar things that we want to do, but sometimes being afraid to ask for help can hold us back a lot.
Lieutenant Colonel in person, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to let you kind of take us home. Any final advice and thoughts with regard to what we've been talking about today?
So what I would tell anyone is, if there's something that you see that you're interested in, try it out. Ask your parents to help you. If they can't, find someone that can. I think a lot of times we fall back, and what I hear from a lot of people is, oh, I wish I would have. Don't be I wish I would have. Go try it out. You may think, I don't want to go into ROTC because I don't want anybody yelling at me. Guess what? We all work for somebody, and we're all going to get yelled at. So why not go try something that has some benefits, to where if you do get in, guess what? You don't have to worry about medical care. You don't have to worry about where you're going to eat, where you're going to live. The military will help take care of that. So not just, Air Force, but any branch. But I would always say expose yourself to as much as possible and try it out.
Absolutely. Well, we have covered a lot of ground. We probably could cover more, but we have run out of time. But what I'd like to kind of reemphasize is there are tremendous opportunities in the Air Force and all of the other military branches specific to aviation and aerospace. And it's really kind of unlimited. And now's the time. I can't overemphasize that. I know the Air Force had and some of the other branches have a shortage of pilots, but also need folks in all the other areas. So I think that we can't overemphasize that. The other part that we can't overemphasize is that if you are in a position of leadership and you have the opportunity to mentor, or just a position of experience because you're experienced in a certain area, and you can mentor someone young and help bring them into the fray, don't hesitate to do so, because the more that do that, then the better off this next generation, our future generation, are going to be with the opportunity. I appreciate you guys taking the time to get together from your busy schedules and really being here on this program for us to talk about these opportunities and what's going on and your perspectives. It's really been great to talk with all of you. I think the event this coming Saturday is going to be a great one. I will definitely be there. And of course, I'm going to be looking forward to seeing Dontae flying in the UH-N1 helicopter, the Huey. So that'll be a lot of fun to see. But I think the overall event, knowing that the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General C.Q. Brown Jr., is going to be there, along with the President of Howard, and talking in a fireside chat manner about what's going on, about the opportunities that are there, and about the challenges that are faced with diversity. in military aviation and all of that. It's just going to be one complete day. So looking forward to it, and very happy to have all of you guys participate today.
Thank you, Vince.
So guys, thank you very much. This has been another very special edition of All Things Aviation and Aerospace, talking about opportunities in military aviation specific to the Air Force for this show. And again, reminding everybody of the event coming up at Howard University this Saturday. So until next time, you guys, take care, fly safe, be safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Vince.